Good afternoon, everyone. It's really wonderful to be here back at IFPRI. In many ways, my first home is WFP. I've been back and forth to WFP so many times, so I really should say that's my first home. But really, my second home is very much IFPRI. So thank you, Rachel, very much for this opportunity to present the report. And thanks to Lex, Danielle, and of course, Suresh for their remarks. And more than that, thanks to all of you for joining us, those of you who are here, but also those who are listening online and will listen later. World Food Assistance. This is a report which is about our core business, WFP's core business. But it's really about much more than that. As Google began to signal, most food assistance is in the hands of national authorities. So this really is a report about a sector that is large, unfortunately somewhat invisible, and that's really one of the issues that we're trying to address here. It's large, it's global, and it's dynamic. It's changing very quickly. So this report tries to give a sense of that, drawing some recommendations for policy and action by different actors. So while we are strongly implicated in this report as WFP, this is not a report about the World Food Programme. It's a report about the work that we and others do to address some of the challenges facing the world today. So what I'll do is very quickly give you a sense of what we tried to do and where we ended up. So first I will deal with the objectives and the approach, then I'll deal with some of the key findings, and finally the recommendations. But the first thing is actually to define this thing called food assistance. And the report makes a very important argument, and that food assistance is very much more than old-style food aid as handouts of in-kind food commodities to hungry populations. It comprises a range of instruments, certainly in-kind, but also other instruments, put in place through a number of programs that deal with particular objectives, but also backstopped by a range of platforms that provide the undergirdings for those programs. So this is the definition of food assistance. It's interesting actually that Ugo Gentilini is here. I think this is a definition that in many ways he helped craft while he was at WFP. So this is the definition of food assistance that we take forward. And taking that definition, we address three questions. First, what has been happening to this thing called food assistance over the last several years at global, regional, and national level? What are the main challenges facing agencies trying to implement food assistance? And finally, what are some of the innovations that are being put in place in response to those challenges? As the report addresses those questions, there are three themes that cut across it. First, that food assistance is one of, if not the most important, but one of the most important bridges between humanitarian action and hunger reduction. Second, and as Ugo said, this food assistance is delivered within food systems. And it's addressing a number of challenges facing food systems that are disrupted. They are flawed, oftentimes they're broken. So building this view of food assistance within this food system context. And then very importantly for WFP, but also for this sector as a whole, that this is a sector which is built, it's a public endeavor certainly, but it's built on layer and layer of private commercial activity. So storage of course, but procurement, transport, finance, there's a huge private dimension to food assistance. So the report captures those. And finally, this is very important because one of the things that we try to do is for the first time try to present food assistance as a sector that has a demand side, has a supply side, but also when you see food assistance in a particular place, it is the result of an interplay between the demand and the supply. So the report tries to capture that. Of course, I'm not going to be able to deal with all of these, But this is the overall approach. So some of the key findings. First, the demand. We looked at a group of countries and tried to understand what is it, when you see food assistance in a particular country, what may be driving that? And we found that there are three factors that seem to be important. The degree of stability or instability in the country, the performance of the food system, and income level. So the lower the stability or the greater the instability, the poorer the performance of the food system, and the lower the level of income tends to be associated. We tend to see higher levels of food assistance. And the countries seem to cluster into four groups: stable, high performers; stable, low performers; unstable, high performers; and unstable, low performers. And as you might imagine, when we look at our WFP's portfolio, the greatest concentration of that is in these unstable countries, but in both countries that have both high and low performing food systems in different ways. Also, a very important finding is that income certainly matters, but not uniformly. You find among the unstable high performers, you have upper middle income countries and lower middle income countries. But very importantly, in that bottom right-hand corner, you find very many middle income countries. So it isn't just income that matters, there's something else going on. Now, at the time that the report was underway, we didn't have a chance to analyze the data, but we're now beginning to build a more empirical understanding of that, and the typology actually works very well, but there are other factors that are at play. So that's the demand side. On the supply side, again, using WFP's data because those are available, but hopefully the view from WFP reflects what's going on more broadly in food assistance. A few things jump out at you. First, between 2009 and 2016, total spending on food assistance, as defined here, more than doubled. So from around 2 billion to almost 5 billion in 2016. So these are direct expenditures. Also, in this arrow show, yeah. So in this chart here, you see the middle income countries as a share of the portfolio expanded. In particular, the expansion was among the upper middle income countries. So Syria and other countries that were upper middle, but actually right now have fallen back to low middle income. A very important dynamic is the surge of cash-based transfers. From less than 1% of 2 billion in 2009 to more than 20% of 5 billion in 2016. And then this has come at the expense, if you like. Remember, everything has expanded. So we're not talking about shrinking of anything. Everything is bigger. But the shares of cash in kind has fallen, logistics fallen, and so on. But capacity building, which is this green segment here, has increased. So this is a sector which is, the supply which is pretty dynamic. But the final chart is that the destination, the uses of food assistance actually have been fairly stable over this period. So in 2009, between emergencies, the blue, and transitions, the red, it's been essentially those still dominate the portfolio in 2016. Development, roughly the same as a share, and then special operations and other. So fairly stable, with a few ups and downs in different places, but what food assistance was doing in 2009 is essentially what it did in 2016. When you look across the world, where is the most dynamism been? So these are the 6 regions: Middle East, North Africa, West Africa, Southern Africa, East and Central Africa, Latin America and Caribbean, and Asian Pacific. So these are changes. So the biggest surge, if you like, in percentage terms, has been in MENA. But East and Central Africa, even though the percentage change is on the small side, the volume of activity in that region has been and remains quite large. And just to one final word on the cash versus food issue. This shows the shares of the portfolio devoted to cash and vouchers and to food in 2009. And this now shows it for 2016, and it's actually quite extraordinary. In 2009, very few country programs, each of these dots is a country operation. Very few country operations had cash. By 2016, almost all did. And this reflects something that actually, again, Google has helped us understand. Really, the blending of cash and food over time and space is what really seems to be the most effective. So those are some of the trends. And the challenges, well, we clustered, the report clusters them into three broad areas. First, challenges that originate in disruptions and trends at the global and regional and national level. Then there's some challenges that relate to food assistance as a part of the humanitarian system. And finally, the challenges linked to food assistance as an activity undertaken within food systems. I think many of those are self-explanatory, but let me just say one word on humanitarian action. Access, it turns out, overwhelms just about everything as a factor that raises challenges and requires innovation to address. And then on the food system structure and functioning, the argument here is that in any given year, a country will be in a bad year, it will be in a good year, and most times, there are many hungry poor living in this thing called the last mile. So those are the issues that food assistance is responding to and require innovation. The report deals with those in some detail. Now, when you look at that, so now the interaction between supply and demand. To build some understanding of that, the report examines expenditure per direct beneficiary for 2015. And a few things jump out at you. First, there's very wide variation. From a country like Zambia, that the expenditures per direct beneficiary are about $5 per person, to Lebanon, where over $200 per person. The second thing is that actually there are a small number of countries at the top end of this chart that face very relatively high costs compared to the others. So this reflects those three phenomena that we think are important. First, the stability issue. Second, the food system performance issue. And then third, access. So we thought, so when you look at countries, it turns out that actually those three factors vary systematically. And what the report does is to ask, what if in these countries with access challenges, what if access were better? The report argues that actually what you see is a lower expenditure per beneficiary. Similarly, what if instability, the challenges facing countries that are unstable, such that what if those challenges could be overcome, such that food assistance, which is being delivered in those contexts, were less costly. So the difference between the argument is that those costs would be lower. And finally, the same thing on food system performance. What if these food systems perform better, such that a particular response had more options than currently available? So this implies three experiments, if you like. An experiment related to lower access challenges, an experiment related to lower instability challenges, and an experiment related to lower performance problems. And what happens is when you take that cost differential and essentially just map it across the beneficiaries in those different contexts, you get an estimate which we argue is not definitive, but we think is very informative of what's going on. and we compute these three burdens. The access burden, which is about $1 billion per year. So if WFP, this is only WFP, remember there are many other actors. If WFP faced lower access challenges, or in those complex emergencies, if the access issues they face were comparable to those in the average of the organization, WFP would have had to spend $1 billion less than it did. Similarly for the instability, it's 2.2. Now this is much bigger because the stability challenge is much more widespread across the portfolio. And finally, the performance burden of about $440 million. So one can think of these burdens, if you like, as dividends. The degree to which the world is able to address them suggests that actually there's a foregone opportunity there. So, implications, let me just finish here. We say that the recommendations in the report cluster into three broad areas. Two that are urgent, two that are important, and two that we call strategic. The urgent challenge right now is to stabilize, increase, and unleash humanitarian funding. Why is this important? Our WFP's assessed needs in 2016 were $9 billion. What we were able to mobilize was $5 billion, so a little bit under $6 billion. So a 40% gap, and we're just one actor. So this challenge facing the world in terms of humanitarian response, the funding for that needs to be greater. This is not to say, that $6 billion was a record level, but not enough. Second, and this is, you find WFP's executive director and many leaders around the world talking about the need to confront these political challenges that are driving hunger and vulnerability. Those are urgent. We need action on them right away. I started out by saying that most food assistance is in the hands of national authorities. So first, that food assistance, which is in the hands of national authorities, needs to be much better than it is. Even WFP's food assistance activities, we need to increase the quality. But that broader effort needs to increase, needs to be improved as well. And the report identifies a number of the criteria that respond to that need. And second, related to that, of course, is national capacities. They need to be enhanced significantly. And then finally, in terms of longer term or more strategic, the first has to do with data. Now, as I said up front, this report relies on information, quantitative information, if you like, drawn from WFP's portfolio. We think it's useful, we think it's informative, but it's far from adequate. There's a need for an effort to pull data together from other sources, and most importantly, from country level, to fill those gaps. And then related to that is to address some really fundamental research questions. First, having to do with the quality of programs. What is the best way to implement a particular food assistance activity in a particular context? What drives outcomes? What drives performance? And second, the role, and Ugo signaled this up front. Is there a role, or how best to leverage food assistance to improve the performance of the food systems within which it is being delivered? So there are two major strategic issues that need to be addressed there. So that's the report. Very, very high level, I guess, in terms of giving you an introduction to it. But very much look forward to hearing your responses. Thank you.